Thank you. So I guess we're the last panel, right? And then we'll try to introduce some interesting things. I think we've managed to bring across put together a good panel. We're from the cross section of the industry and across different countries as well. So I'll give a quick introduction first, and then take you through our panelists and give you an overview of the structure of what we'll be discussing today. So I'm Gerald from Kommunity Ventures. We're a mid-stage venture builder. We like to call ourselves a venture scaler. We facilitate both cross-border structures and strategy, and we're able to deploy capital, and we take positions, both equity and token positions in projects as well. We are supporting a trade finance project in Africa called Commerce, so that's an interesting project that we strongly believe in. So that's just a brief overview of myself and the projects that we're involved in. So moving on to the introduction. So Tencent, you've heard from Aaron this morning about the cross-section of what Tencent is doing in blockchain, as well as the blockchain as a service platform, right? And you've seen a broad range of his use cases there. We've got Michele. So Michele is going to go after Aaron. Michele is specifically looking at use cases involving travel, and which could lead to an interesting discussion on identity, right? And we have Andrew from GBX, who's interested in the movement of the market from retail to institutional. I think that will be a hot topic. And then Liang from the Ethereum Foundation. Liang has had an illustrious career across both finance and securities environments. So there'll be a good discussion between Liang and Andrew, I think. And because he exists at the nexus of the old and new industries, if you can call it that. I'm not sure if we can call it, but anyway. So just to bring everybody on the same page, I'll just do a quick blockchain 101, right? Just to make sure that we have the mechanics right. So blockchain, we're basically looking at, it's a bit of a network, bit of a database. You know, there are many parties. We're trying to establish a common truth without a central controlling node, right? There's some way for all parties to agree on the version of the truth. It produces a history that's immutable, and then the value is greater the more participants are on it. That's just a very quick overview, right? Just to make sure that we're all on the same page. So today, that's the intro end. So we're covering two key things. So we'll run through what's on everyone's mind, and what they're working on, and use cases they're particularly personally interested in. So you get to hear both perspectives here. And so maybe we'll go into Aaron to elaborate more on some of the projects. You want to talk through the slate of projects that Tencent is involved in blockchain? Yeah.
Yeah, of course. 腾讯目前其实我们主要就像早上说的，我们其实更注重的是在这个区块链场景的落地上面，所以我们选取了3个我们觉得说是比较重要的场景 ，to B 的、to C 的和 to G 的场景。所以这3个场景是我们觉得说一个是跟腾讯相关，一个是 对我们的整个社会都是有价值的，明显有这种痛点的这种项目。那我们觉得说，如果作为一个大公司要去做这个事情，我们会去解决他们这些痛点，提供我们的社会价值。所以这是我们腾讯在做这个事情的时候，我们聚焦的一个关注点。那第二个，我们的定位，当然我们一方面是我们自己有自己的核心的这种场景的案例。 或者是我们的项目，但是第二个是我们希望，通过这些案例和项目，我们把腾讯的区块链能力把它做得足够好的时候，我们变成一个开放平台，能够 open platform， 就输出给整个行业，然后让大家去能够得到很快的、比较好的这种区块链的这种平台去做他们的行业的应用。 那我们觉得未来其实会有不同的行业基于区块链去做他们应用，但是并不是所有的开发者都有很深刻的对这个技术的这个开发功底，那它需要积累的。所以我们认为我们会去跟行业合作伙伴形成一个开放的生态，在这个开放生态里面，大家各司所职，然后共同来 形成整个区块链的这个开放的一个环境，我们各自在这里面提供不同的价值，这是我们的定位。对，当然这是还是比较早期，我觉得，对，所以逐步在前进中。
Do you want to bring up so Tencent is working on an open platform. Do you want to give a specific use case or example of one of these use cases that yeah.
我们现在来讲有一个比较典型的案例是我们的一个外部的合作公司，它用了腾讯区块链的平台做了一个叫做法务存证这么一个案例。那在中国其实有很多小额的这种贷款的机构，银行也会有这种小额贷款的这种业务。那当然有很多互金平台也有很多这种小额贷款的这种业务。那这些小额贷款的额度很低，几千块钱、几万块钱。那其实如果说这些小额贷款发生违约、逾期或者坏账的话，如果是走正常的这种法律诉讼的途径，是成本很高的。判决1到2年呢，整个打官司这个成本非常高，所以呢，一般在中国我们这种小额贷款的，如果要有纠纷的话，一般会走我们叫仲裁庭，在中国有这种机构叫仲裁庭。仲裁庭的好处在于说，它可以最快支持7到14天就能够把这个案例去判决下来，只要你做到证据链的齐全，所以。关键在于说怎么样让证据链是齐全的，那仲裁庭是可以采证的。那所以说比如说传统的方式，那可能出了纠纷之后，那个这个贷款的公司就会拿着他签的合同、纸质合同去递交给仲裁庭让他审核。但是仲裁庭的问题在于说，他怎么样去确定你这个合同是真还是假的？这是一个其实是很难去审核，所以需要花成本。但如果说我们在这个用户跟这个服务提供方在签合同的时候，就把这个证据上链保存之后，因为区块链的这种能力，它可以在上链之后保证它的不可篡改，的不可篡改性。所以说，我们搭建了这样的一个法务存证链，那在仲裁庭做一个节点，然后法务服务公司做一个节点，然后这个贷款的服务公司做一个节点，那我们有多方的见证的这种节点之后呢，它其实这个证据上链之后，它的不可篡改性就得到保证。那么当某一笔业务它出现了这个违约逾期要去走仲裁的时候，那么其实这个服务公司只要提交这个当时签的这个合同的明文，那仲裁庭其实它本身的这个节点就有当时这个业务发生的时候的这个提交了这个合同的这个证据。那他去做匹配，匹配完之后，只要说，确实是没有篡改，他就能够很好去采证这个服务提供方的这个证据，所以呢就能支持很快速的去做判决。我们觉得这是一个非常好的场景，所以这个案例其实已经是实际在跑的，在应用的。OK。
So I guess a quick way to verify the truth between all parties enables any disputes to be resolved in a fast and efficient way, and therefore basically enables trust across all parties. Yeah. Okay. That's so. I guess we've heard, and I guess you're working across different government departments as well in that process. So this is a good transition point because I think for Tencent, you're working across. From the B2C, earlier you mentioned some B2C scenarios. You're working in games, enabling digital assets to be transferred between players as well as the data to be transferred across different games. That's one. And then now you've raised a 2G example, right? Yeah. 2G and 2B example. Yeah. So this is a good transition point for us to cross over to Michele actually, because Michele, I think. Michele is from the travel industry, which is and Michele is also from Europe, right? So Europe a little bit more traditional, and travel industry is very. You wanna?
It is very very traditional, and there are definitely a lot of use cases for application of what you were mentioning right now. So, quick travel industry primer in 30 seconds. Travel industry, hotels, airlines, OTAs, online travel agencies. all fighting each other. Is one of the biggest industries in the world, and it's one of the most trustless industries in the world. A lot of players, by their very nature, are still very grown-up, family-oriented companies. So the upper structure, the upper echelons of those institutions and those organizations are very, very, very conservative in terms of where does my silo, my data silo ends, where does my competitor silo starts, how do we exchange? And normally the answer is we don't exchange at all. While the industry itself would definitely benefit a lot by those cross-pollination, how I like it to call it, of data from players, especially non-competitors. We're talking about players that are normally at the same time customer supplier and or competitors on the same things. Like when I sell a hotel room, I do sell it to a reseller, which is also my competitor, because I try to have my direct channel as well, etc. So there is a lot of mechanics there that would benefit from a system where those data can be exchanged in a permissioned way, but on a trustless, let's say, ecosystem. And that's where blockchain comes to play.
Okay, so in this environment, I guess it would seem a little bit challenging to have the whole industry adopt some sort of interoperable standard, right? So how do you proceed then? Like, what's your first step to solving this issue?
Yeah, again, coming from an industry perspective, we try to go very pragmatically, right? So the adoption is definitely very gradual, and especially when we go to bigger players. I mean, I'm talking about the size of an airline, big airlines, etc. They have their own thing normally. When I talk about thing, normally I'm talking about loyalty programs here. So big amount of consumers already onboarded in some kind of contract with one of those players or an alliance of players, Mysamore and that kind of thing. So they have their own system. Normally their system is very centralized and is definitely not on a blockchain, with some exceptions. Emirates is working on a blockchain, Cathay Pacific is working on a blockchain. They normally have a very gradual path in mind, and we do embrace that. So we offer them as gradual as necessary step to chain of steps to adoption, from a double system where you have double input on the traditional system and to the blockchain, then to the adoption of a side chain, then to the adoption of a main chain later on. I see the whole process across the industry happening pretty similarly fast when we talk about transaction of points, so value only. So the bigger and more, let's say, enthusiastic of my prospects or customers are talking about 1 year period doing the whole transition from centralized only to pure blockchain. And then, of course, you have the more careful ones that talk about a longer time.
Okay. So I think there was, so if you're looking at the staging of it, you're looking at loyalty points first, and then building out the profiling.
Correct. Right? So yeah, we're talking until now about loyalty. So points transaction is still value, right? So a number that moves around different tenants. Of course, there is a lot of stuff already to be done there in terms of exchange rates, etc. If you don't mind the comparison, we're talking the Ripple kind gig for the loyalty, right? We're still talking currencies. It's internally minted currency, but it's still a currency, right? So there is a lot of things to be already that have to be addressed there. But for me, the holy grail, or the next step, if you want, is those numbers being attached with traits of people. So if you get to the level where you can exchange not only numbers but also identity, and then we come to your controversial topic. So at least let's talk for now, without the identity, about profiles of people with their traits, with their likes, with their tastes, etc. Then it becomes really interesting. And even more interesting if those traits can be transferred from a tenant to another tenant, or from a user of the platform to another user of the platform, always with the permission of the consumer to take into account. The good part of the travel industry is that this permission is relatively easy to be had, to have a consumer agreeing on this, because we have the consumer in the state of mind of his holiday or vacation, however you call it. So they're really happy to surrender their privacy in order to be entertained, in order to have the holiday of their life, right? The experience of their life. So it's a kind of win-win exchange of information, if you want.
So I guess in terms of use cases, the natural environment is people very readily, similar to perhaps the game scenarios, people readily provide a certain level of information with which you can.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And of course, then the challenge is, because of the regulation, etc., especially where I come from in Europe, but it's kind of spreading around the world, with United States good last in this case, but also in Asia this happens, you have the right to be forgotten, right? So you have the right to control your data, GDPR and all that kind of regulation coming. So the challenge is then, okay, you get the consensus, you get the consent, to use that data, but then when normally the holidays ends and people get back to their life, that comes the challenge how to retain the consent.
Okay. Cool. There is another thread which we can explore later if there's time, and that's the implementation. In terms of implementation, both between yourself and Aaron, because there's a private chain that you're working on right now in terms of implementation, and then how you're going to transition.
I don't know if you have like 2 seconds to talk about it. It's okay, very.
Let's go. Yeah.
So the thing is, again, very, very, very traditional industry. So if you're talking public chain with these guys, normally the answer is just no. The door is closed. So we do start with private chain, also because of the speed of transaction, and public chains now is an issue, etc. So we do start private, but I do believe personally that the world is going at some point with public chain and with cryptographically controlled, security, but on a public chain. Okay. Also, this enables a lot of scenarios, and ultimately what I call the wallet in the hand of the consumer. So in my vision for the 5-year, let's say, target, every loyalty card would become a wallet, a crypto wallet. Okay. While now this is not the case. Right now I'm talking to businesses about inter-business transaction.
Okay. Just for the panel, I might just come back to Aaron for a bit, because Tencent, in terms of private chain and wallet functionality, I know WeChat Pay, the WeChat wallet is quite a powerful or has large reach. So is there any developments in that area in terms of WeChat? I think the Hongbao or something like that.
Yeah. 我们在那个我们其实有做过一个项目，是在中国大陆可以让用户去发红包，大家是知道了。那我们去年的春节的时候，其实如果大家有注意，是我们有一个叫微黄金红包的项目，就是用户可以去购买在他的微信钱包里面去购买这个黄金。然后呢，他用一种红包的形式可以去发送给他的朋友，做一种祝福。因为大家知道说，黄金是就中国人很喜欢的一种理财产品。对，那他在过年很喜庆的时候呢，他也可以变成一种社交的这种一种赠品，用红包的形式去发放给他的朋友。所以这是一个挺好的一个场景。所以我们当时也在想说，能否跟区块链结合一下？所以其实我们并没有说特别的真正去把它用到真正生产环境。我们其实是做了一个尝试，在我们用区块链的时候，在我们去开发我们区块链的平台的时候呢，我们去用黄金红包的这样一个场景来相当于是做了一个实验，然后去接入黄金红包的数据来真正去看看我们的整个区块链平台是否能够承接起这么相对比较大量的这种并发。所以这个项目是比较特别的一个项目。所以对。
So is it a bit like a parallel sort of parallel platform where there's the database, but there's also the blockchain. There's some sort of function between a shared ledger and digital asset, and you're also experimenting with those concepts using. Okay. Cool. Okay, so I think we've talked a little bit about the use cases, interesting use cases from Tencent and Michele's perspective. Maybe we'll move in a bit to the participation in crypto, right? Because Andrew comes from GBX, which is the Gibraltar Blockchain Exchange, which is a subsidiary of Gibraltar Stock Exchange. So, and that enables people to participate in this economy. And I know you have some thoughts on, well, the industry is moving from a retail end to some of these institutions are coming on board now, right? So what's your sense there?
Yeah, I think just to go back to the Gibraltar blockchain exchange. Yes, look, it's part of the GSX group, which is the Gibraltar Stock Exchange Group. So there's two tranches to the organisation. One is the blockchain exchange, where we list our utility tokens. So our friend Jeff Fry was saying that right now, most listings are utility tokens, but in his opinion, which is probably a bit of a Swiss opinion, that not 90% are securities. But at the GSX group, we say, look, that's fine. We are future-proofed for that eventuality. So on the Gibraltar Stock Exchange, that would be our launching pad for security tokens, should and when that eventuates. So just to give a background to our exchange's thinking. But yes, when we talk, once you've done the ICO, once it's been listed, you need to trade these coins on a market. So in old world terminology, it's called the secondary market. So where you launch the ICO is the primary market, and then the exchange is the secondary market. And so yes, what we are seeing definitely is not replacing of retailers or hodlers per se, the initial true believers, but we are seeing institutions coming on board. So be they hedge funds who are secretly looking to trade cryptocurrencies. I think one of the big news items is the announcement of Goldman Sachs to invest in an organisation called Circle, which is a market maker, or what's known as a liquidity provider, who in turn own an exchange called Poloniex. So if you see Goldman Sachs, I think they're a very good bellwether, a very good indicator of what's coming on board. So when I talk about the institutionalization, maybe it's a bit of a harsh terminology, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, but I do think that it's a good thing for participation of institutions, be they hedge funds or what we call the buy side in traditional finance terminology. So the more people who participate in the secondary market, I think that's a good thing, because when you look at what's known as the bid-offer spread in a coin, maybe sometimes it's very wide and you can drive, as they say, a truck through the spread. But if there's more participants, including liquidity providers, then you should get a tighter bid-offer spread. So I think that's the general theme of what I'm seeing. But sure, when this happens, as Nizram and earlier panelists were discussing, we definitely do need some type of regulation. I think we need some a general type of rules of engagement, because just because crypto trading is unregulated, that does not mean you can cheat people, you can deceive people. So I think that's a very good point, and I'm sure we'll have a discussion a bit later as well. If you don't acknowledge this fact, then we've seen what happens after the financial crisis. If regulation takes off, it can be good or it can be bad. And after the financial crisis, I would suggest that we had what's known as prescriptive regulation, such as Dodd-Frank, which is was very heavy-handed in my opinion. And countries like Singapore, Australia, felt the full force of what's known as the extraterritorial consequence of Dodd-Frank. And only now, is the local regulator, the MAS, finally getting over Dodd-Frank and the European version, which is known as MiFID II, Markets in Financial Institutions Directive 2. So now there's a bit of a breather, but sure, I think we should have more of a descriptive type regulation, which, if you want to look for an analogy, is in the FX world, is the Global Code of Conduct, which is more broad rules of engagement. So it's, and I think that's also what the MAS is doing now with their guidelines. So I always carry the guidelines around with me. So as we saw earlier on, the MAS is giving this industry, in my opinion, it's a very level playing field. But if you do cross them, they will come down on you. So please read the guidelines which were issued in November. As earlier was said on a previous panel, 8 exchanges were given a warning, and 1 ICO had to give back their, the monies which they had launched. So, please let's make it a descriptive regulation when it comes, not a prescriptive regulation.
Okay, so I guess this seems like a natural point, because we're talking about regulation, and there's only one lawyer among us. So would the lawyer like to comment on there are a few points that were brought up by Andrew. I think Andrew was bringing up the institutions coming into the market, but also what makes for good regulatory environment. So Liang, do you want to elaborate a bit on your thoughts on this?
我讲英文啊。As a lawyer, I obviously need to start with a disclaimer. Aside from my role at Ethereum, I also work with a couple of other blockchain companies and have my own separate law practice. So everything I say is my personal opinion and not the position of the foundation. So with that, I couldn't agree more with everything Andrew has said. The environment. Let's start with regulation. We're in a relatively new space, and the evolution of how companies and businesses and end users will want to interact using blockchain is something that is going to be evolving in many respects. And intrinsically, in their nature as regulators, the staff on the regulatory team will be a little bit behind, right? It's a trailing indicator. And so for the regulators to believe that they are able to foresee all the possible permutations in future and prescribe the ways in which people can interact, I think is going to be a very difficult one for any institution or any regulator to have, right? Whereas the approach of going back to first principles, what is the purpose of having this regulation? To protect the end user. Having regulations that are written in that fashion, to go no fraud, no misrepresentation, that kind of purposive approach is obviously, in my view, the best way for the regulator to write the regulations, and then to have a role for industry to then say, okay, what does that mean in practice, evolving quickly, right? So that instead of legislation which takes forever to pass, instead of guidelines which will take a long time for a regulator to write, a evolving industry code to go, okay, here's what we're seeing as best practices. If somebody comes up with an even better idea in 3 months from now, great, that's the new best practice. So that's to me kind of the best model for regulation going forward. That brings us to the idea of institutionalization, or participation of institutions in the space. And where that interacts with regulators, I think, is coming back to the point which Andrew made as well. Let's go back to the origins of crypto. The reason why we have Bitcoin in the first place was the financial crisis, and the concern that people had that one of the causes was really a capture of the regulatory agencies by financial institutions, so that regulations were written in favor of entities that then became too big to fail and had to be bailed out. That's one of the mistakes I hope we do not repeat in the crypto environment. It's great that the institutions are getting involved. It's wonderful for growth of the ecosystem that we have not just the retail user, but the intermediate and the back-end financial backbone, I guess, of society participating. Where we have to be careful from a regulatory standpoint is to ensure that there isn't the capture of the, it's good for institutions to take part. I mean, Andrew and I were having a discussion before this. It's good for the institutions to be participants in the ecosystem, but not for them to take over the ecosystem and have it turn into an institutionalized system. So I think that's I think the difference we want to achieve. The goal of learning from the history of the past, learning from experience of people with experience in the traditional finance space, without repeating the mistakes that have been made in that space.
Does anyone want to?
If I could just add, I think, yes, and also the concept of, sure, look, we can learn from mistakes, but we can also, on a green theme, we can also recycle. So we can also recycle some of the technology. So maybe, we can use what's known as the FIX protocol, the Financial Institutions Exchange Protocol, to send orders into the exchanges, say from retail participants and also institutional participants. Because right now, I think a lot of, on the technical side, people kind of use the REST API, which is okay for hodlers who just want to just get a snapshot once a day of their portfolio, because by definition they're a hodler. But if there's more perpetual type flow, you want real-time streaming. So I would suggest that the FIX protocol is better. So let's recycle existing technologies rather than reinvent a new protocol.
And I'll add to that from an industry perspective, I do agree a lot with Andrew, and it's very important to, when the transition is made then from a traditional system to a blockchain system, that doesn't carry the problem not inside the blockchain, but how the information gets transmitted to the blockchain. Because the problem is, okay, you have this trackability, you have all that stuff, but to make, I'm Italian, to make the mozzarella example, as I call it, you have all this sort of supply chain things, and then it all says that the mozzarella was under 0 degrees, so it's safe to eat. But then who says that? There's no blockchain telling you this. There is a thermometer. And how that information goes into the blockchain is the problem, I think. In the loyalty world, definitely, this is a lesser issue because we're not talking about the health of people, apart from they get drunk in hotels, but that's another story. But yes, the problem of how the information does get into the blockchain is very important, and there is a lot, decades of computer science and IT that mandate, not institutionally, but they created best practice, etc. To your point about the institutions, perfect, I don't agree. I cannot agree more also. I think that apart from exchanging and where money, people's money is at stake, this, again, is very translatable into the loyalty world where we're talking about companies issuing currency in the end. So definitely anything that allows better control or not an institutional control, but a better double checking between tenants, between partners, that exchange points is welcome. And again, not institutionalized, but open to institutional players to control, etc. Because again, indirectly is the money of people.
Yeah, just kind of a connected point, but and maybe a bit of an outlier view. But I view blockchain more as a communication technology rather than anything else. And what it does is that it changes the relationships between people. Right? So in a centralized system, it's one-to-many. You have the airline company communicating what it wants as the loyalty program to the users.
Few to many in this case.
Right, few to many. But what blockchain really enables is the feedback mechanism whereby you have the actual users, kind of indicating through their votes on the blockchain what they want to see. And it's a much more powerful mechanism in changing, many of the things we do. So, the purpose, the topic of the panel is next in blockchain. And I'm really excited to see what that is, because I think it's something that we might not be able to imagine. If you we are in a gaming. It's a gaming sponsored environment, right? But if you think back to gaming, I started gaming 30 years ago, right? Single user games, static environment. What you got from the company was that was it. There was no way to feedback and say, well, I don't like level 2 and I don't like the challenges here and so forth, right? But we moved on with the internet as a communication mechanism, as a communications medium, to allow the feedback, to allow the shift entirely to multiplayer driven, right? All this was without blockchain, but purely as a communications methodology that was sufficient to create a sea change in the world. And what this does to every other industry, I'm just waiting to see.
Absolutely, and if I can dare say something kind of at least controversial, I think you are very right. And I think one of the cross-industry, at least, practices that would be, and hopefully is about to be disrupted, is marketing in general and consent to be spammed or to be addressed with communication. I believe that if the regulation was started in a decade, let's say, there wouldn't be any need for a GDPR, for an institution coming and saying, you know what, you can't, you must not, do something with people's data about after the expiry date or etc. that you agree with the people, because in a blockchain powered or permissioned anyway world, the consumer would have the final the final word directly in saying, okay, don't touch my profile anymore, or don't touch my profile for those and those and those reasons. I do want to be connected. I do want to be the object of a communication for such and such topic, not for other topics.
安全和
So I